Welcome to the High Capacity Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Chan, a fellow at Brookings. I'm thrilled to be joined today by my guest, Lei Xing, a world-class expert on Chinese electric vehicles and autonomous driving. He is the former editor-in-chief of China Automotive Review and a co-host of the podcast China EVs and More with Tu Li, who was previously on the podcast. In that episode with Tu Li, we looked at China's overall EV landscape. This time, with Lei Xing, we'll zero in on China's push into autonomous vehicles and robotaxis. We'll look at how China's autonomous driving technology is evolving and how the Chinese government is supporting the industry, as well as how Chinese companies are scaling up robotaxi fleets around the world. Welcome, Lei Xing, and thank you for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Kyle. It's finally nice to meet you through this platform and talk about AVs. That's the topic today. Yeah, I guess
it's a hot topic.
Yeah.
Just to begin, I'd like to focus on sort of making sense of the technology. There are a lot of terms that are thrown out there, like smart driving, autonomous driving, things like ADAS, ADAS, robotaxis, different levels of autonomy, L2, L2 plus, L4. And just to start, for those who don't follow the industry so closely like you do, what do some of these terms mean, and how do they kind of differ in China?
Wow, this question alone we can spend hours because it's the terminologies themselves are actually part of the narrative. So when you say smart driving, that's definitely a Chinese term. It's a cheesy term. In Chinese, it's called 智驾, right? Smart driving is actually really in China, it points to ADAS or L2++, which is the driver assistance, which means you have to pay attention at all times. And you as a driver are still responsible in case of accidents, right? You're responsible. The smart driving, I think it's a term it makes it more appealing in a way. It sounds, 智驾 in Chinese sounds good rather than advanced driver assistance system, which is a jargon that takes time to say it, right? So smart driving it sounds better, and it's a marketing jargon. But it really is, a lot of it is level 2, which means you want to call it level 2 plus, level 2 plus plus, point to point, which is what Tesla's FSD is at this point. But they in the small print, it says that you have to watch the road, right? You have to pay attention. I think that's a major difference from when you go over to L3 and L4, when the responsibility transitions toward the OEM, toward the company. Let's say a Waymo, right? Let's say the OEM, right? The OEM name. Whereas there's specific regulations actually now, just most recently, China approved 2 vehicle models to pilot operate on level 3, which put in simple terms, level 3 is when you can have your eyes off. So when I'm speaking to you, I'm looking at you, I'm looking at the screen, but I could also do this and the car drive itself, right? So you can do other things. And at that instance is when the OEM, if they push this feature and the industry allows it to be commercialized, that's when responsibility transitions to the OEM. And same as level 4, which is level 4. More recently, there's been 2 tracks. Before it was 1 track, it was the driverless type. When you say level 4, you think about Waymo, you think about Cruise, Baidu, Pony, WeRide, we'll talk about those companies. Is something as a private consumer you cannot buy, but you can utilize as a ride hail, right? On either on their own network or on Uber or on Lyft.
So these are like the robotaxis.
But in recent months, there's been talk about this consumer level 3 and level 4, which means you can actually buy a vehicle that has the level 4 capabilities. And eventually you can put that into a fleet, which is what Tesla is trying to do. Right? FSD supervised is essentially L2++. And when you go from supervised to unsupervised, then it's level 4. So there's actually now these two tracks, and a lot of these Chinese companies are, Xpeng I think is the great example. They're not only trying to push this level 4 robo, they're going to call it robo. They have Pro, Ultra, and then next up is robo, which means something with level 4 capability you can buy. And then at the same time, they're also developing a robotaxi to put on a fleet that you cannot buy. So this is the more recently the interesting kind of change of a direction of what's possible in terms of autonomy.
Yeah, so the space is changing quickly, and you have some players that began more with the level 2 sort of smart driving features on existing vehicles moving up the ladder. You have some companies, and we'll come back to this, that were mainly robotaxis to begin with, and that's sort of their main strategy. But before we dive into all that, which is there's a lot to get into, I was just wondering if you could talk about some of the Chinese government policies to support the industry, whether it's on the regulatory side, whether it's on the central versus local government side. There seems to be a range of different policies that are trying to find this balance between safety and then promoting the progress in the industry.
Well, when you talk about China, you have to talk about always kind of a roadmap, an overarching policy. What is that? Well, I probably will have to point to the Made in China 2025 that was announced many, many years ago, right? There was a roadmap for EVs. There's a roadmap for, let me sum the EVs and the smart EVs and the autonomous vehicles into one thing, which in China is called the Intelligent Connected Vehicle, ICV. Those encompass the EVs, the AVs, and everything else, right? So we have that overarching roadmap of Made in China 2025, which China wants to lead in these, verticals, EVs, AVs. And then you have a series of, in recent years, things on safety. I think we just saw the recent cybersecurity data transfer policy that was just announced this week, right? About what could happen for somebody like a Tesla if they want to utilize the data in China to get it outside of China, right? This is not currently allowed on both sides, but there seems to be some rules coming into place where you can have, for somebody like a Tesla, there's ways to get around it, and you have to meet these, regulations. And then I talked earlier about this level 3 pilot operation, these permits given to these first 2 models. And then that's on a national level. But locally, right, at least in these big tier 1, Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, there's local push to pilot operate robotaxis. And in fact, right, one of the companies, Pony, I will call them one of the big 3 robotaxi companies, they're commercially operating in all the 4 tier 1 cities in China. They're the only one currently, right? And that's because of the local policies in place that are supporting the rollout of these robotaxis. And I think this only, let's say for Beijing example, the permits that are given to these robotaxis, they're kind of phased. First of all, you could have ones that you can go on the road and test with safety drivers. And once you reach a certain milestone and you accumulate the experience and the data, you go to the next stage, you get to the next permit, which means you can have a safety driver on the passenger side. and then you take out the safety driver completely, which is what Baidu has achieved in all of the cities that they're operating. They're 100% driverless in China. But they had to go through these series of testing, pilot operating, before they could actually offer paid rides, right? These are all the local policies that specifically says what stage, what thresholds you have to reach in order to go to the next step, right? So this is the national policy and the local policies working in tandem to make this happen. And then you also have to have the requirements on the vehicles themselves, right? The ICVs. And sometimes I think in China, there's also back in the days, this probably could be 10 years ago, China is already piloting this vehicle road cloud. There's specific policies on that, right? There's cities, let's say a city of Wuxi, close to Shanghai, where it's been a test base for let's say it's called not CV2X, maybe LTE in China is more used, right? All of these policies, not only communications, the vehicles themselves, the AVs, testing, it's a staged, phased way of making this happen and possible, right? And now we're talking about scaling, it's another topic. What has happened, what's going to happen next, but it's definitely the policies are in place that make these happen. The overarching one versus the local one, they're working in tandem. I think that's very important in China.
Yeah,
for any industry, right?
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this is a big theme for the whole podcast. Yeah, and I guess, some of these things seem to depend on, Wuhan might have their own sort of timeline and sort of staging and zones where these, driverless cars are permitted and things like that versus Shenzhen versus Beijing. Beijing might be more restrictive perhaps for, certain reasons.
Yeah, no, I was going to just touch upon that point. Actually, Wuhan is in a way more lax when it comes to, come on, let's bring the autonomous vehicles into the city and run them, right? Yeah. Whereas Beijing is obviously has a historical and kind of the political capital, right? In China, it's these companies, Baidu's, Ponies, when they get these permits, it's tougher. You have to go through more, it's more restrictive. The where they can operate has expanded, but it's mostly in certain areas of Beijing, right? Yizhuang, right? Southeast part of Beijing. And they now have started operating in the Daxing airport and one of the train stations, right? But Wuhan is actually pretty much all of the city. So you have that kind of a difference even within China, right? It's regionally, even the policies and the support are different. Just like actually in the US, right? Arizona is more lax than, let's say, other states. And that's why you see Waymos running in Phoenix. And back in the days when Uber, when they were doing their own autonomous driving, I think Arizona was where they did a lot of piloting because the support was there compared to the other states, right?
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. On the robotaxis, I was just wondering if you could describe what the experience is like for average urban resident in one of these major cities in China. How do they summon one of these robotaxis? What is it like to enter? What is the experience like? Is there a safety driver sitting there or no safety driver? Can you change your location as you're driving around? Does it feel kind of like a Waymo, or is it a very different interface?
I'd say yes to all the questions. The latest one I've written in China was September of last year in Guangzhou. This where WeRide is based, right? They're running this GXR, which is a Geely van style robotaxi. Currently, you can hail these via several ways. You can hail these through their own app. You can hail these through the WeChat mini programs. You can hail some of these even through the Baidu map or the AMAP map, navigation, right? They're integrated. So there's a lot of ways to do it in China. I mean, it's not a surprise because things are very seamlessly integrated in the first place. The rides themselves, I'd say there's subtle differences because the type of vehicles they use, comfort level, there's definitely a difference. There's also a subtle difference in terms of whether the vehicles are aggressive or jerky. For me that have ridden in multiple different in the US, right, in China, many different platforms. It might be different because when I go into a robotaxi, I just expect it to work. I don't get nervous. I don't. It just feels like another vehicle that you get in and you take a ride in, you get to your destination. But in terms of comfort level, if I had to rank, probably the Baidu's latest one, RT6. It's kind of a minivan style. It's very comfortable. Pony runs a lot of the Lexus RXs, but they've updated their fleet to later generation, let's say the 6th, 7th generations. And Baidu used to have kind of the cheaper style vehicles where they may not as comfortable. But I think if we look at globally, I have not been on the latest Tesla FSD supervised or the ones in Austin, but I say the Waymo ones, I'd say it's a gold standard because they do use the I-Paces, right? The Jaguar I-Paces, which is quite comfortable. And the way I describe these is they're quite boring, which is they're good, right? Because they just go and you don't feel anything.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the robotaxis in China, it would be a WeRide, Pony, Baidu, they've gotten to that point. But in terms of coverage, right? Like in terms of scaling rapidly, I think everybody is still looking at Waymo because Waymo, as we saw, right? We talked about them getting this latest financing round and scaling. They want to be global.
Yeah.
But that's another topic, right? We don't have currently a global AV company compared to, let's say, a global EV, BYD everywhere, Tesla everywhere. But the AVs are currently still more regional. I say the Chinese ones are more global because they're going into Middle East, they're going into Europe. Whereas the Waymo, I think they're going to be in London and Tokyo. Yeah, I think they just work. But for as a consumers, I think eventually the pull is kind of without another person inside the vehicle, you're more by yourself, privacy.
Right.
And also at the end of the day, is how affordable it is, how cheap it is, and where does it get to, like the coverage, and how long it takes to hail one.
Yeah.
Those are the other metrics. And for the robotaxis companies themselves, breaking even, scaling, from most of them now have over 1,000 vehicles. By the end of this decade, I think a lot of the goals they have is for that number to reach 6 digits, hundreds of thousands.
Things are happening fast. I mean, we're just getting started in terms of seeing the global expansion of these robo-taxi services coming out of the US and coming out of China. And it seems like, a lot of them are using sort of like a mixed strategy. Like I've been hearing about, Uber partnering to offer WeRide in some cities. And also, I think Waymo uses Zeekr EVs. Or is starting to use them more, and that might help to drive down the costs, especially outside of the U.S., where Chinese EVs are not so heavily tariffed. So there's sort of this interesting mix of technologies between the U.S. and China. It's not purely just like one tech stack versus another.
The simple debate is really vision only or LiDAR. So you have the Tesla route, their FSD. Eventually robotaxi versus most of the other ones.
So Tesla uses cameras only, right? And the others use LiDAR.
Yeah. I think that's the jury is still out on that one. There's proponents, right, on both sides. And that's why, we look at the robotaxi, we don't only look at these companies, but really up and down the chain, who's involved, right? I think and also these robotaxi companies, their strategies of whether they want to focus on the level 4 alone or they want to branch out to the level 2, the smart driving, the L2++, point to point. Strategically, let's say a WeRide and the Pony is different because WeRide has moved into the level 2++ arena along with Bosch, whereas Pony is still only focused on the pure level 4 robotaxis. And then you have a company like Momenta, which is, they kind of started out as a kind of level 4, but now they're in many, many Chinese and foreign brands, EVs in China, this point-to-point level 2++. At the same time, they are going to be working with Uber to launch robotaxis in Munich. They are working with Mercedes to launch both the level 2++ in the Chinese market and the robotaxis outside of China. Those are only two examples, but I mean, there's these mobility companies we haven't talked about. There's Uber, Lyft outside of China. There's Didi, there's Cao Cao, there's On Time, and quite a few others. Hello Bike. I'm sure you've heard of them, right? The shared bike. They're moving into robotaxis. Cao Cao Mobility, the division of Geely Holding, they want to put in 100,000 robotaxis.
Wow.
That's their strategic goal.
Yeah.
Right. There's so many players involved that there's strategic changes. There's expansion. There's these OEMs. Didi, for example, has a joint venture with GAC Ion to produce. They just recently produced this dedicated robotaxi for the Didi autonomous driving. Didi is a little bit late.
Didi is the Uber of China.
And then there's the chip companies. There's the LiDAR companies. There's the computing. Like someone like a Lenovo is actively in this space. You wouldn't think of, but they have a vehicle computing unit, which is providing the domain controller with NVIDIA Thor chip for the WeRide GXR that are running currently.
Well, you mentioned LiDAR, for example. And that's one area, kind of going back to this camera versus LiDAR debate. Not so long ago, LiDAR was much more expensive. That I think was one of the reasons why like Tesla wanted to go with this camera-only route. They thought it would just add too much cost. And Waymo has gone with a lot of LiDAR and radar and sort of all these sensors. And then I think has started to kind of hone down their sensor package over time. But the cost of LiDAR seems to have dropped dramatically. And I think a lot of Chinese players in the LiDAR space are the main industry players. I was wondering if you could say more about that.
So there's the big three robotaxi companies. By the same token, there's the big three LiDAR companies. I think in any of these verticals, there's always multiple Chinese companies competing. And more often than not, there will be those the leaders, right? The front of the pack. So those three will be Hesai, RoboSense, and Xi'an. And Hesai and RoboSense are probably they're the biggest rivalry in the LiDAR space, just because they are the ones that have put LiDARs on these vehicles. They have scaled, they have reduced the cost of LiDARs into the hundreds of dollars of range compared to maybe thousands of dollars just 2, 3, 4 years ago. I remember, so I was at CES recently, just 3 years ago, the industry was talking about the potential of the entire LiDAR space delivering 1 million annually. And now you have these two players already themselves delivering 1 million LiDARs annually. Part of that reason is due, first of all, LiDAR, I think it's a selling point, right? We had Neo, we had Li Auto, some of the early ones that put LiDAR on the top of the vehicle, on the roof, the watchtower type. But now, as we talked about earlier, these consumer level L3, L4, and the robotaxis scaling the content, the addressable market for LiDARs, given they have scaled, given their cost is going down, and given their importance of being a redundant sensor, at least from the LiDAR proponents, they see even a bigger volume. For example, Hesai has doubled their production capacity from 2 million to 4 million LiDARs a year. Because the opportunity of these level 3, level 4 vehicles, because you will need multiple of these LiDARs on the top, on the sides. So the addressable market is higher. And in the pipeline, these foreign companies, automakers, these Chinese EV brands, they will put LiDAR standardized on even lower priced vehicles because of these cost reduction.
Right.
So that they can standardize these features at, without cutting prices. They're going to say, we're going to have the price at this point, but we're going to offer LiDAR.
Like BYD had made a big announcement.
Watch out. BYD this year, the LiDAR is going to be a huge thing for them to help them kind of offset the recent, pressure. They are. They like I've said, when you're a number one, it's always the most dangerous. Because when you're down, the only way to go is you try to go up. But when you're at the top, it's just that much harder. So I think one of the tactics for BYD this year is going to be pushing out these better features in their God's Eye ADAS, plus having LiDAR standard on cheaper vehicles. So,
yeah, it's really interesting because I think it's sort of counterintuitive for some people who think of LiDAR or things like that as premium features, and they're costly, so you might only put them on your, say, luxury models, versus what you're talking about, where there's actually economies of scale to be gained by making it kind of a standard feature across a wider range of models, even down to the more affordable range. And so, like BYD offering, its so-called God's Eye smart driving system on vehicles as below even the $20,000 price point, I believe. So that's quite a capability that you might only expect with, say, a higher end luxury car.
It's definitely not a premium thing anymore. I started out as a premium hardware sensor that you can only buy at some of the higher priced vehicles, but it's standardized. It's commoditized. I think already in China. So
yeah. And I guess there's almost sort of like a floor in terms of safety for what they are supposed to offer in terms of, especially think about more difficult weather.
One of the policies we did not mention is this compulsory AEB that will kick into place January 2028. So all
what is
vehicles in
AEB?
China, automatic emergency braking. Yeah. It's going to be standard required not only on the passenger vehicles, but also on the light trucks. Some of these companies, they're trying to achieve, I think Huawei or Li Auto, they've kind of said they could do AEB that speeds up to 120 kilometers per hour, right? And in order to do that, LiDAR is required, because even during night, you need to see far ahead.
Right,
you need to see 300, 400 meters out. So I think that's a great opportunity for the addressable market to grow, because if you have these policies in place, requirements.
Yeah. You mentioned Huawei, and I was just wondering if you could say something about like what Huawei is doing in all this, because they seem to be everywhere, and yet they don't they're not like a conventional sort of like
No,
EV or AV company,
no,
right?
no.
They're not a conventional company in any sense, but they're obviously very much in the space.
It's only, I still remember this clearly, at the April 2019 Shanghai Auto Show is when Huawei actually announced their official entry into the automotive sector, right? It's not that long ago. It is long ago, but it's not that long ago. And we all know the reason why. It's because of the other restrictions that they face, right? So I think they're forced in a way to expand into other verticals, and auto industry is one of them. And we wouldn't say Huawei is an OEM. Let's say Huawei is kind of the Xiaomi or the Apple, but without producing their own cars. But they are actively, through their kind of the Harmony Intelligent Mobility Alliance, working with the state-owned automakers. They are very active, everything from the ideation, styling of these premium brand vehicles, all the way into the hardware and the software and the components, even their own LiDARs, the Harmony OS, their e-motors, their charging, right? They've expanded into these branches that support the auto industry. And Huawei, when you put a Huawei, at least the last few years, it pulls the Chinese consumers because the things that they could do, right? Whether it's the phones, the foldable phones, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
very viral things that they've done is a big plus for them. And to be honest, right? You have these iTOs, you have these Luxids. The vehicles are designed, the quality, the plushness, and the features that they put in is miles ahead of what the foreign premium brands could offer, in tune to the Chinese consumer demand. And let's say that there's a bit of nationalistic factors in there as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, but without actually Huawei saying we're an OEM, but we're the integrator, we're the facilitator. Mm-hmm. And we help a lot of these state-owned automakers, right? They don't have their own independent Chinese brands, have not done well, but adding Huawei in is almost like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like you now have wings.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
It's like a Red Bull, right? Huawei is kind of the Red Bull of these state-owned automakers.
Yeah,
and right, and the sales have been taking off.
Yeah, it's really interesting to watch because this sort of like premium brand, this association with like top quality technology in China and Huawei. And then also, I guess there's the integration with Huawei's broader ecosystem of products and services, Huawei phones and other Huawei devices. So I guess that also offers something extra beyond just the vehicle itself. You get this deeper integration.
Yeah. I mean, right, with all of these features, even iTO, for example, the iTO M9, it's priced over 500,000 RMB. For every 10 vehicles sold in China above that price point, 7 are the iTO M9.
Wow.
Because the bang for the buck is just too great to pass on.
Yeah.
What do you get a Porsche for 500,000?
Yeah.
There's not a Porsche that sells for 500,000 in China. It's usually over 1 million, right? Yeah. So, and there's also these, right, the people who buy them, these businessmen, they're upgrading. So they have to think about what they can get. And Huawei does the job.
Yeah. I mean, you had this really great chart showing the struggles of brands like Porsche in China, where for so long they were the premium brands, and if you were a successful business person, like that's the kind of car you would want to show off to your clients. But now we see a huge shift in market share towards these local Chinese brands, and that's on the premium side, right? It's not just a race to the bottom on the price. It's in this segment,
And going back to the topic today, really the ADAS L2++, that in itself, that kind of the track, the race is very competitive in offering kind of the point-to-point capability. And right, we have different tiers. We probably put Huawei currently at the top tier, as a top tier in terms of offering level 2++ point-to-point.
Yeah. So I was wondering if you could talk about now sort of AI and autonomous driving, the kinds of models that are powering these systems and the shifts over time. I mean, we've seen, like in the US, a shift from sort of a hard-coded modular approach to these end-to-end train systems, where there is no longer a need to define every edge case and hard code that into the model. You kind of have the whole thing learn essentially from massive amounts of training data. So I was wondering if you see something similar in China, and what else is happening more broadly on the model side.
Oh yeah, definitely. And this has happened the last 2 years, maybe. There's this change so much to the point where companies have to, in terms of their, it's previously it's rule based, kind of, right? And now the jargon that everybody talks about these days are VLA, LLM,
vision language action models.
XPeng is pushing out their second generation VLA later this year, and what they want to do is achieve the same level that Tesla FSD has currently in their 14 point whatever version, the FSD supervised. He Xiaopeng, he even made a bet, right, of whether they can achieve it. So actually, I think in retrospect, Tesla FSD is still the gold standard for a lot of these Chinese companies, because they have this model. First of all, it's vision only.
Right.
XPeng actually ditched LiDAR. They want to move to vision only in the point-to-point level 2+. They want to be, let's say XPeng is China's Tesla. They're the most, right? So whatever Tesla want to do, they want to do, right?
Right.
But certainly VLA, vision language action, and even without the language, right? I think XPeng in one of their previous press conferences talked about, what comes in goes out, right? How the system reacts. And even for that to happen, you mentioned about AI, really, why are the NIOs and the Li Autos and XPengs are moving into their own SoCs? Because
those are their special chips.
Yeah, system on chip, basically for autonomous driving, is they can get the best capability through their own chip rather than buying from a third party in order to achieve this VLA end-to-end model. And whether in NIO, the new world model, the Li Auto, their own kind of the VLA. Actually, I experienced their i6 in September in Beijing, and it's FSD. The minute you leave parking lot, you push the button, it goes.
Yeah.
And during the trip, right, you can say to it, please, at the next intersection, turn right. Even though it was on a previous, let's say, a navigation-based trajectory, you can, tell it, and it'll answer back, okay, I'm going to turn right the next intersection. Right? These are things that's all, the AI and it's also what Jensen Huang talked about in their CES speech about thinking and reasoning model, the Alpha Male, is their kind of the Tesla FSD killer. Yeah. And in China, the XPengs, the Li Autos, the NIOs, the Huaweis all have their own kind of the model. But at the end of the day, everything is pointing to the end-to-end. Potentially, if vision only works, that's jury's out. I think if you want to go really to true level 4 robotaxi, probably LiDAR is still needed. But yeah, I mean, especially considering all of these models that are available in China, how they can be integrated. Let's say a Grok on the Tesla FSD. I'm hearing they will also soon have this capability where you just tell Grok, I want to speed up to 60 miles per hour. I want to take a left at the next traffic light. You speak to it. I think they're pushing this out, but this is already available in China.
Yeah.
Many brands, right?
Yeah.
And actually, the screen, when you look at the screen, it spits out the thinking, the reasoning in the background in text format. And I mean, this is just within the last 1-2 years of these models in China, DeepSeek, right? We heard about the last few days, WeChat using the Doubao, I think, right? Or the other one, I forget the name of almost like Grok-like a capability that are in place that are available to these companies. But I say Tesla is still, I think a lot of Chinese companies, they still benchmark against Tesla FSD.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to see this convergence in strategies around bringing in sort of what we now think of as AI, reasoning models, language capabilities, like being able to not just react to some kind of traffic pattern, but to understand that there is a person crossing in front of the street, and how might they move, and how should the vehicle respond to that? Yeah. And then also this push into, you mentioned the SoCs, these self-developed chips that are going into these advanced driving systems. I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about this. How much are Chinese EVs and AVs relying on, say, NVIDIA chips versus their own, versus other domestic or foreign suppliers?
Still a lot. I think
on NVIDIA.
If you look at NVIDIA, their Thor and their earlier versions of the chips for autonomous driving, they're still in many Chinese EVs, right? It's also a selling point.
Yeah.
And there's Qualcomm. Qualcomm recently moved into this autonomous driving space because previously their 8295, 8195, 8775, these chips were only for smart cockpit. And the future, we haven't mentioned the Chinese domestic chip companies.
Yeah.
The Horizon Robotics of Black Sesames. The future is where you have these single chips, let's say Xpeng Touring chips, that will work for both the smart cockpit and the driver assistance system. So one chip integrated. But I mean, nowadays, right, I mentioned WeRide runs their the GXR Robotaxi through the Lenovo vehicle computing with NVIDIA Thor chips in the domain controller. Many of these, the vehicles, the models on sale, they have dual Orin X chips. But I think that's, Qualcomm, these smart cockpit chips. Let's say a company like Elite Motor, they're actually using exclusively Qualcomm for both smart driving and the smart cockpit, right? So these are different tactics or strategies depending on who the company we're talking about. But for somebody like Elite Motor, where they try to be vertically integrated, but at the same time think about cost, right? Their vehicles are definitely not the Neo or the Auto price points. Their priorities are probably a little bit different at this point, whereas the other ones, I think there's a bit of geopolitical risk consideration involved, given what's happening in terms of the H200 chips that Chinese companies still need, right? But I think both sides are trying to work out what you need to do in order to have that happen. You have to meet certain requirements in order to get the H200 chips, right, from both sides. So there's strategically, there's better capability, the reasons to have better capability of your vehicles in terms of ADAS, in terms of robotaxi. There's also de-risking involved of this chips. Xiaomi is actually developing their own SoC, even for the EVs. They have for the phones, the Xuanji, right? I forget the English name, but the EVs, it's coming.
Yeah.
It's all part of being self-reliant. You can say it that way, self-sufficient. What forced Huawei to move into the auto industry?
Yeah.
Right. Those are all at play at the same time. I think we can't say it's death for globalization yet.
Right.
Because the capabilities, the make or buy from a business decision point is different for these different players.
Yeah. So like many of them are pursuing like these almost kind of like full stack approaches. But at the same time, with their own sort of self-developed chips, their own self-developed models, integration, but then also still where they can integrating with other suppliers, whether domestic or foreign.
And this is where the Mercedeses, the Volkswagens come in, because they can't make, they have to buy. But that's why Mercedes is working with NVIDIA, working with Momenta. Volkswagen is having to work with the XPeng for their EE architecture. And even for the chips, right? Volkswagen brand is actually the first foreign customer of XPeng's SoC.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Announced, at least in the Chinese market, because they have to keep up. And they don't have the capabilities in-house. So that's kind of the contrasting what you see, right? It's you recently wrote that piece on China being the global frontier, and that's exactly part of it. Is this technology wise? It used to be Chinese dependent on the foreign companies, but now it's the other way around.
Yeah, now it's flipped.
At least in China.
Yeah. And then especially on the EV and autonomous vehicle space, where the Chinese technology really is sought after, whether it's CATL's battery technology or it's Momenta or some of these other Chinese EV startups like XPeng. Yeah. I mean, looking out across sort of the global landscape, thinking about issues like the shifting geopolitical winds and things like that. How do you see some of this unfolding? Do you see kind of like a fragmented global market for various robotaxi and smart driving technologies, where some parts of the world will be open to Chinese and American providers, or and what are the chances that we would see like Chinese AV or robotaxi players in North America? Maybe that's not a political sort of politically feasible pathway. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think of looking ahead in the next 5-10 years?
So, I think as we speak, right, Tesla is testifying with the Senate Commerce Committee on the self-driving regulations. Right, we talk about that. Yesterday, NADA, the CEO of NADA, I tweeted this, that as an association, they would support blocking Chinese auto manufacturers from entering the U.S. But they're not going to control what their members do, right? Whether these dealers want to franchise the Chinese EV brands or any Chinese automotive brand. But for the robotaxi, right, being a global company currently is very difficult. But these Chinese big three, they're all going into Europe. They're going to Middle East. So is, let's say, the Uber and the Lyft, these mobility companies. Obviously, they're not in China, because we have Didi, we have, right, these similar ones. A bunch of these Cao Cao mobility. We have On Time. We have a bunch of other T3 that are competing. Meituan, right? Too many. So I think it's going to be more regional at this point. But there's neutral locations in the world where you can have everybody.
Right.
And then there's places like in America where we are, where that's not the case, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
we can't buy a Neo, we can't buy an X1, we can't buy a Li Auto, at least not yet, right? You can't buy a
Right.
And the Chinese AV companies, they have their California, Silicon Valley, they've been testing, but I think recently there's been more scrutiny. Even the LiDAR companies, RoboSense has an office in Michigan near Detroit.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Hesai is based in the Valley. Baidu is, I mean, many years ago, 2018, I was at the Baidu office. They were showing what they try to do with this Panda mobility, which is no longer existent. They're the kind of the car to go, Chinese car to go, but it never went anywhere. They were showing like these potential ride-hailing robotaxi solutions and products.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the U.S. is such a last frontier that the AVs are definitely. But we have the Zeekr, the Ojai, right?
Right.
That's one way to get in.
With the Waymo, yeah.
With the Waymo, right? But they retrofit all the LiDARs, all the sensor suites in the U.S. They get this kind of the brick car from Zeekr, and then they fit these sensors. I think that there's always workarounds. So you could say, can something happen, let's say, the other way around? I don't know. But yeah, it's definitely where the regions, first of all, the operating conditions are favorable. Let's say in the Middle East, right, where it's dry, it doesn't, the weather is relatively okay. Let's say Waymo is running in Phoenix, right? I was there last June, and all the trips I took were on Waymos. Where the weather is nice, whether nobody's outside during the day because it's so hot.
Yeah.
Where there's policy support, where there's money. And that's where the Middle East comes from.
Right.
Europe, in certain regions of Europe, Switzerland, France, WeRide has been, right? And these companies, WeRide, Pony, they're already launching commercial service in Abu Dhabi, Dubai. Can they be in the U.S.? I can't see that in the near future. But same as Waymo is not in China.
Right.
So for the foreseeable future, you have these. The biggest market is your home market, but everybody wants to expand in order to be called global. At the same time, we have to talk about Waymo. Before it's Cruise, but Cruise no longer around. But now we have the Neural and Lucid are working with Uber, right? Lyft is working with others. Let's say possibly Zoox, right? Zoox is coming into play. There's more players adding into the mix in the different regions, and that's still happening. Even in China, right? Cao Cao Mobility, I talked about. Hello, Robotaxi.
Yeah.
Right. Didi. So I think the space is still expanding. There's still more players coming in. We haven't reached that point where we can say for sure this is the final, the end game, right?
Yeah.
It's still murky at this point.
Yeah. Can I ask you one last question around sort of commercial and delivery autonomous vehicles? Because we've been talking a lot about on the passenger side, and there's also a lot happening with commercial trucking and also sort of like these smaller autonomous delivery vehicles for packages and other things. So I was wondering if you could say something about that.
Then this is where China comes in again, right? The companies I can think of is UIC, is the CEO and founder is a good friend of mine. Our daughters happen to go to the same kindergarten back when I lived in Beijing. This guy who started this company, CargoBot, he used to be an engineer based in the US from Delphi, which is now active. And he found this is a platoon kind of autonomous trucking that are already operating in Inner Mongolia. Platooning of these trucks delivering goods and coal, right? In that
And they don't
region.
have any human drivers in them.
Right. Well,
Right.
well, the way it works is that they have, I think there's one human driver, but the other trucks don't have a human driver in this platooning.
Right.
There's the Meituans, there's the Neolix, two biggest logistics kind of driverless vans, smaller kind of delivery goods, Neolix and Zelos, right? They were actually at CES.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And the most surprising thing, I think, for the Western people, or at least the audience in the industry, when they talk to Neolix, is they're surprised at the amount of those already running in China. It's in the tens of thousands.
Yeah.
Already, right? So they're doing work. And whenever I go back to Beijing, I stay in Shunyin district, which is where the auto show is held. And in that specific area, SF, Meituan, others, I mean, the autonomous vehicles on the roads they're already integrated with the fabric.
Yeah.
To the point where it's no longer, they're just there. They're just running along with bikes, with cars, with everyone. Nobody really like, oh wow, they're running. They're
just normal vehicles on the road.
Even at the JD, right? In the JD Logistics in Yizhuang, where their headquarters. I mean, those things are running around.
Yeah.
Last mile, even delivering groceries for you. Because the true last centimeter, you have these people riding the fast food delivery guys. They have to take all these bags from these kind of the autonomous vehicles and then deliver it to the households, to the apartments, right? And that's where these things come in. That they're already a daily fabric of life in certain parts of cities in China. And UIC, what they do is they're actually in a very specific vertical of the autonomous vehicle, which is delivering luggages at airports. Pick up, drop off these luggages I think they're already in Hong Kong. I think they're in Qatar. I think they recently went into another airport. I forget. But these are companies that are only 10 years old, right? The EVs, these startups, most of these companies are 10, 11-year-old companies, right? And their niche are different. They don't have to compete. They find a niche and they go in and then they scale.
Yeah.
And right, there's so many of these companies that we're only mentioning the ones I know. I don't think I even know there's other ones that are already like this.
Yeah, there's so many startups in this space. And I would love to go to the airport and have one of these sort of like robots take my luggage. I don't have to deal with anything, especially if you're dealing with kids and you don't have an extra hand. That would be pretty handy.
Yeah.
Well, this is really, really awesome. What a great conversation. You know a tremendous amount. More than practically anyone else out there, I feel like. If people want to learn more about you and your work, where should they go?
Well, I have several platforms. I have the China EVs More podcast. I have my own Medium channel, and I also do a little bit of YouTube work because I like to, sometimes shoot some videos of when I attend events to give my thoughts. You can look me up on YouTube, Medium, LinkedIn. My handle is Lei Xing 77. Mm-hmm. That's probably where you can find me.
Great.
And again, I like to correct one thing I said. I don't consider myself an expert. I consider myself an enthusiast.
Well, you're being too modest.
Yeah, because there's so much to learn. There's so much happening. There's things are moving way too fast. And again, the verticals, the automotive, right? We talk about EV, AV mobility, robots. At the very end, the end game is they're one thing. Automobile, right? Autonomous, mobile, right? I'm still learning myself. And I'm glad that I've covered this the industry for so long. There's still so much to learn. And again, the people that you meet along the way, whether it's whether it's you, whether these people that start these companies, some of them I know them on a personal basis, and it's just so fascinating to be this part of this revolution, I think.
In our lifetimes.
It's great that we can communicate and educate and through these platforms that we all have. We try to be fair. We don't want to be too sensational on things and say all the positive things. We have to be critical. There's bad things that happen, but and that's the fun thing to watch, really. To be along on this journey.
Exactly. Well, we're all learning together, and I'll definitely include links to places where people can follow you. And thank you so much, Lei Xing, for an awesome conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so if you like this episode, please rate and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. You can find episode transcripts and more information on the High Capacity newsletter at high-capacity.com. I'm your host, Kyle Chan. Thanks for joining, and see you next time.